You've been taught to hold everything together, tighten your grip, force the outcome, make life obey. But somewhere along the way, you started noticing. The tighter you held, the more things slipped through. The more you pushed, the more resistance you met. The more you chased peace, the farther it ran. You believed you had to conquer life, outthink it, outplan it, outperform it. You thought control was safety. You thought structure would protect you. You thought if you could just get it all right, the chaos would stop. But it didn't, and it never will. Because life isn't a project. It's not a puzzle to be solved. It's a river, moving, flowing, unfolding. And the more you try to dam it, the more you feel the exhaustion that no sleep can heal. The kind of tired that lives in the soul, not the body. Because the battle isn't with the world. It's with your own resistance. You wake up already bracing, already calculating, already fighting the next moment before it even arrives. And you think, if I can just push a little harder, maybe then life will soften. If I can just control a little more, maybe then I'll feel at peace. But control is seductive. It whispers safety, but delivers tension. It promises power, but feeds fear. It tricks you into believing that force equals progress. And yet the Stoics knew better. They pointed inward. They said, peace isn't out there. It's within, not in the world, in how you meet the world. So you begin to ask better questions. What if the exhaustion I feel doesn't come from what's happening, but from how tightly I'm trying to manage it? What if life isn't too much? What if my grip is just too tight? You pause, you breathe, and you begin to see the real weight is not what's on your back. It's the pressure you put on yourself to carry it perfectly. You start to feel the difference between discipline and obsession, between structure and rigidity, between effort and force. Effort comes from presence, force comes from fear, and you're tired of living in fear, tired of holding on so tightly that you forget how to feel. So you try something new. You open your hands. You let go of the idea that you have to control every outcome. You let go of the belief that success requires struggle. You begin to trust. Not blindly, not passively, but deeply. You trust that your preparation is enough. You trust that your presence will carry you farther than panic ever could. You trust that life isn't waiting to break you, but to shape you if you'll stop resisting. You begin to notice the wisdom in water, soft, yielding, but strong enough to shape stone. You begin to feel how much power there is in patience. You breathe slower. You move with rhythm. You stop fighting the current and start navigating it. And for the first time in a long time, you begin to feel something you thought you had to chase: peace. Not because everything is fixed, but because you stopped trying to fix everything. You stopped surviving and started living. That is Stoic philosophy, not domination, alignment. You don't push the day forward anymore, you let it come to you. You meet it not with force but with presence. Because you've finally understood. What you chase with urgency runs from you, but what you meet with calm often reveals itself. You used to rush from task to task, as if more motion meant more meaning. But now you walk slower. You speak softer. You breathe deeper. Not because you're lazy, but because you've stopped using intensity to cover your fear. You've let go of the idea that faster is better. That urgency is noble. That overwhelm means you're doing enough. You've let go of the idea that your value is in how much you can carry. And in that letting go, you've found something you never had when you were achieving: clarity. The renowned clarity to know that not everything deserves your reaction. That not every opportunity needs to be chased. That not every interruption is urgent. You've started listening to your life instead of commanding it. You've started observing instead of overreaching. And in that stillness, you've noticed something else. You were never behind. You were just misaligned. You don't resist the moment anymore. You align with it, even if it's not what you planned, even if it asks you to slow down, even if it asks you to wait. You've stopped being ashamed of stillness. Now you treat it like strategy. Because what you used to call doing nothing was actually you recharging your depth. And now you honor that. You don't rush your mornings anymore. You wake with awareness. You sit in silence. You remember that how you begin is how you continue. And how you continue is how you become. You've stopped proving. You've started practicing. Practicing stillness in chaos. Practicing grace in discomfort. Practicing trust when control is no longer possible. And that practice has made you powerful, not in appearance, in presence. Because you no longer need to dominate the day to feel confident. You simply need to carry it with rhythm. You've stopped asking the world to move on your terms. You've started asking, what does this moment require from me? Not from my ego, from my clarity. And often, the answer is simple. Breathe. Step back, do less, let go. You don't spiral into problems like before. Now you observe them like passing weather. You let them move without dragging you. You let life be heavy without collapsing. Because now, you don't draw your strength from outcomes. You draw it from how you hold yourself when outcomes shift. You don't argue with what's happening. You respond, calmly, wisely. With the still hands of someone who has stopped forcing and started flowing. That is Stoic philosophy. Not ambition without end, but discipline with depth. You've stopped forcing the future to arrive faster. Now you let it unfold, not passively, not carelessly, but without the panic that used to follow you into every hour. You don't sprint through life anymore. You walk with rhythm, because you've realized no destination is worth the cost of losing your presence on the way. You used to wake with tension in your chest, already running, already behind, already chasing time as if it owed you something. Now you rise like someone who understands that each breath is a reminder you're already where you need to be. You've let go of the need to manipulate outcomes, because forcing them never gave you control. It only gave you anxiety. Now you do the work with open hands. You move with focus and release the result, because you no longer define success by what happens. You define it by how aligned you stayed. When nothing happened at all, you used to pray for certainty. Now you carry peace in the absence of answers, because peace is no longer found in what's resolved. It's found in your ability to remain while things stay open. You've stopped trying to fix people. You let them grow at their pace. You stopped trying to predict their choices. You let them surprise you or disappoint you. Either way, you stay grounded, because your emotional balance isn't borrowed from others anymore. It's built from within. You don't look for stability and control. You find it in adaptability, in knowing that whatever happens, you won't abandon your center. That center was built quietly. In the early mornings, you stopped rushing. In the conversations you didn't need to win. In the choices you made when no one noticed, and it holds, because now you've stopped asking life to be perfect. You've asked yourself to be present. You don't fight time anymore. You move with it. You respect the season you're in, even when it's slow, even when it's unclear, because speed has never been your answer. Now your answer is depth. You no longer seek attention for how fast you're growing. You seek integrity in how deeply you're rooted. That rooting has changed how you carry pressure. You don't panic. You pace yourself. You don't resist, you redirect, and in that redirection you find power. Not loud, not immediate, but unshakable. That is Stoic philosophy. Not force. Flow. You've stopped demanding answers from life. Now you listen, with less urgency, with more trust, because you've realized some answers don't come through thinking harder. They come through living deeper. You no longer grip every moment like it owes you clarity. You hold it gently, allowing it to speak when it's ready. And when it doesn't, you don't fill the silence with panic. You sit in it, because silence isn't emptiness. It's space. And space is where your next step has room to breathe. You've stopped over-planning your peace. Now you protect it, not with rules, with rhythm, with the discipline to slow down even when your mind says rush, with the strength to walk away from what doesn't align even when it looks like opportunity. You don't chase alignment anymore. You create it through your behavior. through the way you speak when no one's there to applaud, through the way you pause when old habits ask you to hurry, through the way you hold your posture even when everything around you asks you to fold. You've stopped mistaking force for strength. You've stopped confusing speed with success. Now, your strength is shown in how you choose what to ignore, in how you remain kind when no one deserves it, in how you return to breath when noise surrounds you. You've dropped the fantasy that life must always go your way. And in doing so, you've made space for life to show you a better way. You no longer resist change. You learn from it. You don't fight transitions, you flow with them. Because transitions are where you meet your edges, and your edges are where growth lives. You don't need guarantees anymore. You move forward anyway, because your peace doesn't depend on knowing. It depends on showing up regardless. You've stopped asking the moment to comfort you. Now, you ask it to reveal something. And it always does. Not in words, but in lessons, in energy. In the subtle way it shows you what you still cling to. You no longer cling. You open, you release, you adjust. And in that adjustment you find clarity. Not instant, not complete, but enough. Enough to take the next step. Enough to stay aligned without needing life to explain itself. You carry less now, but what you carry has weight. It's your values, your boundaries, your breath, and you guard them, not with defense, with devotion. That is Stoic philosophy, not tight fists, but open hands and an anchored heart. You've stopped resisting uncertainty. You sit with it now. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's real. Because life doesn't promise clarity, it invites presence. You no longer fear what's unclear. You meet it with quiet breath and steady focus. You no longer demand a plan before you move. You move with intention, even when the path hasn't revealed itself yet. You've stopped confusing control with strength. Now you know. Real strength is letting go of what was never yours to hold. You've dropped the illusion that you must always know what's next. Instead, you've learned to ask what's right now, and then you act. Not from fear, from alignment. You don't panic when life pauses. You pause with it. You don't rush to fill the gap between one season and the next. You allow the in-between to sharpen your patience, to stretch your vision, to teach you that timing is not always yours to decide. You've let go of the frantic need to fix everything. You've seen how some things repair themselves when you stop interfering. You've stopped trying to rescue people from their discomfort. You hold space without taking responsibility for their healing, because you finally understand your peace isn't a tool for someone else's chaos. You offer calm not because you owe it, but because you've become it. You don't control outcomes. You embody values. And the more deeply you embody, the less you need to micromanage. You don't argue with life anymore. You listen. You adjust. You choose your response based on your principles, not your pressure. You carry yourself now like someone who has surrendered, not in defeat, but in wisdom. You surrender to the moment without abandoning your direction. You surrender to the season without compromising your discipline. And in that surrender, you've discovered something rare. You don't lose power when you let go. You gain it. Because the man who can release what isn't his to control is the man who can master what truly matters. You've learned to soften your grip without weakening your focus. To stay light without being careless. To lead your life from the inside out instead of letting the outside steer who you are. You don't chase what's not for you. You trust that what's meant will arrive when you are ready to receive it without forcing it into place. That is Stoic philosophy. Not rigidity, but deep, steady trust. You no longer carry tension into every task. You move through your day like someone who's already grounded. Because you've learned, life responds not to force, but to frequency. To the energy you bring to what's in front of you. You've stopped expecting each action to produce immediate results. Now you value consistency over outcome, because you know who you become through repetition matters more than what you gain through urgency. You're not here to force progress. You're here to align. And alignment doesn't require constant pressure. It requires presence. It requires choosing to do things well even when no one's watching. Especially then, you no longer treat your discipline like a punishment. You treat it like a gift, the gift of knowing. You are not ruled by mood, by noise, by reaction. You are ruled by rhythm. And rhythm is what saves you when everything around you feels out of sync. You've stopped rushing healing. You've let it take its time. Because now you understand you can't force your way out of pain. You have to walk through it with clarity, with patience, with the posture of someone who trusts even when he doesn't yet understand. You no longer demand peace. You practice it in the way you slow your breath when stress rises, in the way you say no to what pulls you away from yourself, in the way you stay silent when your ego wants to speak. You don't use strength to dominate the moment. You use it to stay calm within it, because you've realized the more you need to prove, the less you actually hold. Now you hold your power quietly. You walk into spaces with less need to be seen and more intention to see clearly. You don't take things personally. You see them for what they are, a reflection of others' experience, not an attack on your worth. And when someone misunderstands you, you don't rush to correct them. You let your actions do the explaining. You've replaced force with focus. You no longer multitask your life. You give full attention to one thing at a time, because full presence is your new efficiency. You no longer need the world to affirm your direction. You affirm it yourself through how you live, through how you move, through the quiet rituals that keep you aligned even when nothing outside of you makes sense. You walk through life now not needing to grip it. You let it unfold. And in that surrender, you gain something greater than control. You gain peace. That is Stoic philosophy, not reaction, but rhythm. You've stopped letting frustration lead the way. Now you pause. You listen. You ask what the moment is actually asking from you. Not what your habits want to do. Not what your ego demands. But what your clarity knows. Because you've seen what happens when you move too fast. You miss the truth beneath the surface. You respond to shadows instead of substance. You give your energy to problems that only needed your stillness. Now you offer stillness first, not passivity. Presence. The kind of presence that notices when you're about to react and chooses to remain instead. You no longer escalate everything. You soften, not because you've lost your edge, because your edge is now so sharp, it doesn't need to be used all the time. You don't slice every tension. You breathe through it. You don't meet every challenge with volume, you meet it with restraint. Because the man who can hold his fire without losing his light is the man who becomes untouchable. You've let go of urgency as a way of life. You've traded speed for accuracy, hustle for awareness. You now ask not just what to do, but how to do it without leaving yourself behind in the process. You no longer punish yourself for not having it all figured out. You respect the pace of becoming. You show up without demanding perfection. You keep going without waiting to feel flawless. You've released the version of yourself that needed everything to be controlled. Now you trust that control isn't the highest form of strength. Adaptability is. So you adapt. With grace. With wisdom. With the kind of humility that doesn't shrink, but stands calmly without the need to force. You've let go of being seen as the most powerful in the room. Now you aim to be the most peaceful, the most present, the most consistent, because you know true strength isn't felt in how hard you hit back. It's in how little you let the world knock you off your inner rhythm. You've learned to rest without guilt, to slow down without shame, to say no without explanation, and in those boundaries you've found freedom. The freedom to choose what matters without explaining it to people who've never had to protect their own peace. You no longer react to chaos by becoming it. You respond with order, with a breath, with a posture that says, I trust myself to handle this without breaking. That is Stoic philosophy, not brute force, but unshakable calm. You don't chase peace anymore. You bring it, not with noise, but with how you enter the room, how you stand in uncertainty, how you keep your voice low when the world tries to raise it. You've realized that calm isn't a feeling you wait for. It's a decision you make in the face of chaos. Again, and again, and again. And every time you choose it, you reclaim power. The kind of power that isn't measured in outcomes but in presence, in restraint, in the ability to say, I don't need to control this to remain grounded. You've stopped letting small things steal your alignment. You've stopped letting people pull you into their storms. You've stopped letting your past write the next sentence of your life. Now, you hold the pen, and with it, you write with fewer words, less urgency, more meaning. You no longer need to explain your path to those who don't walk it. You walk, and those meant to understand feel it. Not because you tried to convince them, but because truth doesn't beg. You don't defend your peace anymore. You maintain it by knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, by knowing when to stay and when to walk away. You've stopped fearing slow seasons. You've seen their purpose. They aren't punishment, they are practice for deeper patience, for finer focus, for the clarity that only arrives when the noise fades. You've stopped chasing productivity as proof of your value. You've replaced it with presence, with fewer tasks done with more care, with a kind of rhythm that honors your energy instead of exploiting it. You've made peace with being misunderstood, because clarity within matters more than agreement without. And when people judge your stillness as weakness, you smile. Not because you agree, but because you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. You've become immune to the urgency of the world, not by resisting it, but by seeing through it. You've learned, most urgency is manufactured, most pressure is imaginary, most chaos is contagious only when you touch it. So now, you don't touch it. You remain. You return to breath. You hold your posture. You move through the fire without adding fuel. And that kind of movement is not dramatic, but it's transformative, because you no longer force life to meet your pace. You adjust your pace to meet life with strength. That is Stoic philosophy. Not dominance, but deliberate presence. You don't flinch when things slow down. You don't panic when life pauses, because now you know, and the pause isn't punishment. It's permission to look deeper, to adjust, to breathe. You used to rush to fill the quiet. Now you protect it, because the quiet has shown you what noise always hid. Your own voice, your own rhythm, your own truth. And in that truth, you've discovered a new kind of power. One that doesn't require control to feel stable. One that doesn't rely on certainty to move forward. You walk now without needing guarantees. You trust now without needing evidence. Because the life you're building is not rooted in outcomes. It's rooted in alignment. And alignment, you've learned, requires fewer things. Fewer distractions. Fewer opinions. Fewer interruptions. You've stopped overcommitting. You've stopped over-explaining. You've stopped offering pieces of yourself to things that don't honor your peace. Now, you move slower but with more certainty. You speak less but with more clarity. You do less but with more purpose. You've traded urgency for presence. And in doing so, you've taken back your time without having to fight for it. You don't need to chase opportunities anymore. The right ones arrive when you're no longer too distracted to receive them. You've stopped asking, what do I need to do more of? You ask, what have I been forcing that I need to let go of? And the answers are simple. Trying to impress. Trying to explain. Trying to outpace your own nervous system. Now you slow it all down. You breathe into discomfort. You stay with uncertainty long enough to learn from it instead of running from it. You're no longer afraid to feel stuck. You've learned that stuck often just means still. And still is not failure. Still is the place where the next version of you is quietly forming. You don't chase healing anymore. You create space for it. Through your morning routines, through your refusal to argue with the past, through your willingness to sit with discomfort without numbing it. You've let go of the pressure to constantly grow. Now you aim to deepen, to move from a place of wholeness instead of hunger. That wholeness was never out there. It was under the noise, beneath the rushing, inside the breath you forgot to take. Now you take it. And that breath becomes the beginning of a new rhythm. That is Stoic philosophy. Not more, but less. Done with full presence. You no longer look for power in intensity. You found it in consistency. in how you return to your breath every time life pulls you out of yourself, in how you return to your values even when they cost you comfort, in how you return to your rhythm when the world tries to rush you. You don't need adrenaline to feel alive anymore. Now you feel most alive when you're fully present, fully grounded, fully honest with what the moment is asking of you. And most of the time, the moment isn't asking for more effort. It's asking for less resistance, less pretending, less performing. You've stopped living like life is a performance. Now you live like it's a practice, a sacred one, built not in what you say, but in what you return to when no one is watching. You've stopped forcing clarity. You've let it rise in stillness, because clarity doesn't shout, it whispers, and you only hear it when you stop interrupting it with panic. You don't fear slow seasons anymore. You don't resist pauses in growth. You honor them, because you've learned the roots don't grow when the tree is rushing. They grow when the tree is still, and your roots are deeper now, because you've stayed still in the discomfort. You've stayed consistent in the waiting. You've stayed loyal to your principles even when there was no applause. You've stopped needing life to feel good in order to keep going. Now you keep going because you've made peace with the fact that progress isn't always felt. Sometimes, it's only seen in hindsight. You don't chase quick results anymore. You build permanent change through your breath, through your posture, through the way you choose presence when your instincts want reaction. You no longer expect life to hand you peace. You cultivate it in how you live, in how you wake, in how you prepare instead of pressure yourself. You've stopped needing others to match your pace. Now you walk yours with full attention, and whoever is meant to walk beside you will feel your rhythm without needing explanation. You've let go of the idea that peace is the reward. You've seen that peace is the foundation. You don't chase ease anymore. You carry strength. You don't demand answers. You live the question without losing your center. That is Stoic philosophy. Not fast, but rooted. Not reactive, but deliberate. You've stopped needing to fix everything immediately. Now you let some things breathe. Because not all clarity arrives on demand. Some of it comes after space is given, after silence is held, after pressure is released. You no longer confuse urgency with importance. You've trained your eyes to see through the noise, to feel what matters beneath what's loud, to separate the essential from the emotional. You've learned that healing isn't a race. That understanding isn't always immediate. That sometimes what you need most is not another step forward, but a moment of stillness where you return to yourself. You've stopped interrupting your discomfort with distraction. You sit in it now, not to suffer but to learn, not to dwell but to listen, because the truth that reshapes you often waits in the quiet you used to run from. And now, you don't run. You remain, with breath, with patience, with the kind of strength that knows stillness is not weakness but mastery. You no longer panic when people misunderstand your silence. You've realized you are not here to explain your calm to those addicted to chaos. You don't react to every invitation to defend yourself. You don't step into every storm that calls your name. You remain where your peace lives. You protect your energy like something sacred, because it is. You've stopped giving your time to people who treat your presence as a convenience. You've stopped proving yourself to those who never wanted to understand. You've stopped overextending to hold things together that were never meant to last. Now you let go. Not bitterly, but bravely. Because you know. Releasing what no longer aligns is an act of courage, not loss. You've replaced forcing with flowing, not inaction. Intelligent surrender. You let life speak before you interrupt. You let your instincts rest before you respond. You let your nervous system relearn safety and slowness. And when things fall apart, you no longer see it as failure. You see it as an invitation to build something stronger from the pieces that remain. You've stopped fearing emptiness, because in that space you found yourself. Not the version that seeks to be admired, but the version that simply chooses what's aligned again and again until nothing else fits. That is Stoic philosophy. Not tension, but trust. You don't seek peace at the end of the road anymore. You walk with it now. Not because the path is easier, but because you've become someone who no longer argues with reality to feel okay. You don't wait for the chaos to stop. You stop contributing to it. You don't beg life to slow down. You slow yourself down and let the world move around you without pulling you out of rhythm. You've stopped thinking presence is passive. You now know presence is active discipline. The decision to stay, to feel, to listen, to remain, and in that remaining, you've found access to something rare. You've found the ability to live without urgency, to love without condition, to move without resistance. You no longer fear surrender. Because you've seen, surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means letting go of what was never yours to hold. You've surrendered the need to be first, to be loud, to be right, to be perfect. And in that surrender, you've become someone who no longer needs validation to feel certain. Now, your certainty is born from behavior, not feelings. From how you hold yourself when no one is looking. From how you breathe when nothing goes according to plan. You've stopped apologizing for walking slowly, for resting deeply, for choosing silence when noise is available. Because now you know, the man who slows down without falling behind is the man who moves from alignment. You've dropped the pressure to impress. You've replaced it with the desire to be true. And truth, you've found, doesn't have to be aggressive. It can be soft, it can be quiet, it can be spoken through consistency. You no longer use discipline to punish yourself. You use it to protect what you've built, not from others, from your old patterns, from your old need to do more just to feel worthy. Now you rest when needed. You say no when required. You remove what drains. You give only what is clean, what is clear, what is given freely, because it doesn't cost your peace. You live differently now, not because life changed, but because you stopped fighting it. And in that release, you found room to return to yourself. You don't look for control anymore. You look for coherence between your values and your actions, between your breath and your choices. And that coherence has become your compass. That is Stoic philosophy, not about winning every moment, but about moving through life without losing who you are.